Okay, do you hear? Can you hear me?
Well, they will when they've all stopped talking.
Okay. So this is a two voices talk. I will talk here, and Ellen will stay nearby, and will tell you whether what I saying is true or not. Now, as you know, the research work package is transversal, as the others you have just heard about. And the slogan of the research work package is no money, no research. But we can research for money. And this is what we have done. And what I will try to show you. Anyway, the main point is that the main deliverable of this work package was the same as the one that you have heard from Lehman. So we do really need a research from clinical database to be able to provide inception to whatever kind of research. And you have heard what the steps forward have been for this. They're very difficult, but we are close to a decision. Then I will show you, now we spend a few slides to show you what is defined as the EpiCARE Initiative, which is a coordinated effort towards dedicated EU funding to come soon in the next Horizon calls. And then, just to open to Emilio, I think that Emilio will explain this more in detail afterwards, but certainly from the research work package there is a strong opinion about the need to develop a consortium for clinical epilepsy trials to reach the even rare and complex epilepsy patients who are around in Europe, and as you know, cannot be reached with the actual systems. Now, what you see here are the names of the main epilepsy research EU-funded projects which are still ongoing or which have expired recently. These Desire, EpiMirna, EpiPGX, EpiStop, EpiTarget, and EpiExchange. And then, as you see here, EpiCARE, even if it's not a research project, has been included in this initiative, which is a two-day meeting where representatives of each of these projects will present the main results in terms of research, trying to find common pathways of collaboration. And what is interesting for us here today is that there will be also talks from representatives of EpiCARE. Now I'm not going into detail. There will be a session on genetics, a session on therapeutics, and in this session Emilio will speak for both the International League and EpiCARE in improving clinical trials in epilepsy. Then a session on comorbidities, a very important one, very important to lay eyes at this point in time about comorbidities, because as you know, they are the main topic of the next EU call for Horizon 2020. Then a session on biobanks, a database for sharing big data, especially for the neurobiological area. And there will be a talk of Ingmar in this context, representing both Desire and the EpiCARE project. Important, perhaps more important than the first day, the second day. The second day has been organized by the European Commission, especially the new commissioner, which is in charge of the research projects in epilepsy, is Anna Graca. She's new in this position. She has substituted Hotel, who was the previous officer. And she's very interested in epilepsy. I think they had that exchange with Ellen. And what is interesting for us is the title of this entire day of work. It's translating research into action, shaping the future of epilepsy research. And as you see, there are representatives of the European Commission, of the International Bureau for Epilepsy, then a representative of families, of associations. In this case is the lady chairing the Italian Epilepsy Federation for Epilepsies. And then a number of other bureaucrats and politicians and decision makers for allocating money. And I wanted to show you also that Ellen will speak in this context, and this is very important. It is important because having a space to talk in this day together with the decision makers will possibly make a bridge between the expiring research projects which I have listed in the previous slide and the future of funding. As you know, EpiCARE cannot be funded for research by itself because it's not a legal entity, but certainly it's an added value and asset for whatever project, and perhaps we can find a way of collaborating with new projects and draw some advantages in terms of research. And also, Eugen Trinka will have his say in this day as a representative of the Commission on European Affairs. Is Eugen here?
I'm here.
You want to say something?
Not at the moment.
Can you share?
So you didn't know you were involved?
I don't have any time.
And that's it. Now, Emilio is going to...
So, Rima, I think we come first showing some data on the survey, and then we come last.
Yes, because we had to do a survey also for clinical trials. So what we will do the survey.
Okay, that's okay. No, I wanted to, I mean...
Oh, if you want, you can step in on it. You
Yes.
can change the order.
We can
No. I just wanted to use this this point. This is spontaneous support that the research work package gives to the clinical trials or package. It is very important. Now, the situation now, everybody knows it's trivial, but I wanted to summarize also for the representatives of associations here. What's happening now is that the centers act independently in different parts of Europe based on some vague and variable relationships with pharma. And maybe pharma selects a center in a given place because of different reasons. And in that center, perhaps the patients who would most benefit from the specific trial are not represented. So this has to be entirely avoided. And the only way to avoid this is to create a legal entity. EpiCARE is not. EU projects are legal entities, but certainly they're not entitled to do trials with drug companies. To become the main interlocutor capable of negotiating with pharma and providing a quick recognition of patient subgroups and locate them with respect to geography centers. So we do need a database, and we do need a consortium. Yes, absolutely. Otherwise, it will be impossible to reach critical mass of patients with very rare and complex epilepsies. This is our point of view. And just to say that some of the people who are here today will be invited to, in addition to those who are seen already, to this second day, but perhaps Ellen wants to explain this. We were asked to provide names for 5 people, in addition to, for example, I will participate this day but as a representative of Desire. So 5 extra people with respect to those who represent specific projects, but then they insisted they only want 3 people. So that's
the financial space. Basically, there's been such an interest from the MEPs and people from the EU. They now want to restrict the number from 5 to 3 from each project. Although I, as a speaker, am an added extra on day 2. So It's 3, at the moment I've got 4 names and it's got to go down to 3 and I haven't even entered into the discussion about that yet.
Okay, okay, so but you have to wait for the guillotine at some point. One.
Yeah, right. Let's have a discussion at the end. Oh, Marco's going to talk first.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
I saw that it was.
No, I know, no, but Marco's just adding something at the end.
Since money is an issue, I think there are some options there for getting some fund. We have a couple of these projects running in our institute. One is on GLIA, which is this one. The head of the program of the project is Frank Kirchhoff in Hamburg, Germany. This is nice. These are Marie Curie projects that are delivered as innovative training networks. They're very competitive. We tried 2 times or 3, I don't remember. At the end we got it. This pays for PhD students. Okay, so people who are paid for 3-4 years. It gives extra money for the lab, and the average amount of money per lab is, including the student, is about 250,000 euros, which is not peanuts. And I think that there is a call every year. There was one that is closed in January 2018, and these are the figures that they have. So they invest quite some money. The issue here is that money are not for research, but are for the researcher. So there are some rules, complicated rules, not very complex actually. So you cannot hire somebody from your lab, but you have to have somebody applying from abroad, from where you're working, and you have to support him with a lot of money compared, for example, to my other postdocs. This person who is a PhD student is a higher salary, but that's Europe. And then there is a lot of secondments involved. So when you hire a person, he has to spend at least 6 months elsewhere within the consortium. And the consortium can be as large as 15, 20 groups. Being us ERN, I think there are more chances that our potential application could be granted. So we can think about this. Probably the next call will be in January. The next deadline will be in January 19. I know we cannot apply. I don't know if we can apply as EpiCARE. Renzo told me that probably is not possible. But any person within the consortium can apply as PI. We have some experience in that. We can help with that. So think about it. PhD students, not necessarily biologists, they can be also MDs that they want to do a PhD. They have to be young enough not to be, I think, 5 years from the previous, degree. Okay, that's it.
It is quite true that EpiCARE can't apply as a consortium because it's not a legal entity, but having EpiCARE support is added value, and therefore if you have several institutions from the consortium being the people who apply, then the consortium can add support to that. That's the way it's seen.
How many centers might be interested in having a PhD student for 3-4 years? That means that they will have to give a degree, a PhD degree at the end. How many within the consortium?
I'm sorry, how many?
Interesting.
No, I'm asking, see, because some of the centers do not have a PhD course. No, of course. Out of the 28, how many would
Well, there's several hands gone up, yeah. Yeah. Great, thank you. Rima.
So, for the clinical trial work package, this is a work package where we have a working group with Eugen, Lieven, Vicente, and Sylvain that are here, definitely with me, and Emilio. And we had a couple of meetings, I think even more. We had 2 WebEx meetings. We had a first face-to-face meeting in Barcelona in September, and another face-to-face meeting at Washington at the American Epilepsy Society. And I believe that these meetings were basically focused on thinking around the consortium and how to handle this. And this, Emilio will discuss this with you. What I will detail very quickly, however, are the deliverables for year 1 that were number 1, the survey. So the idea was to see, and I will summarize it like that, what is the force of EpiCARE when we are thinking about the clinical trials? And definitely at a second level, what are the needs, what are things that we can improve as a network? Again, the consortium, the collaborative work will be one of them. And the other deliverable for year 1 was the application of the ECRF. I will not detail this, but we can discuss it because this was adapted from the work that was done by the Commission with Emilio there and based on the NINDS. We can again discuss it, but I will go into the survey. So it was to map the existing regarding CTs, and we had many questions about basically the number of ongoing trials. We took the last 5 years to work on this. Sponsor and funds, and you will see that we are basically working with the industry. EpiCARE members' involvement, and we wanted to know how much they are involved in the design and the steering committees, but also in the guidelines. How many of they were PIs in the trials that were done, and how many of our network were authors or co-authors, not first or last, but at least co-author within these trials, where we all know that they are not easy to perform. And definitely we asked about the top epilepsies that were discussed, the needs and the expectations. So we had 20 surveys answered, and I will go quickly on that. 14 centers had both adult and ped groups. 2 centers were exclusively for adults, and 4 centers were exclusively for children. So just to say that our network is at least 34 centers that they are trained and they have availabilities to do clinical trials. We know it, but now we have also the numbers. So it's really something that is important, I believe. I'm sorry.
How can we have 34 centers?
Because we have, I'm considering adult and pediatric.
Okay.
I put the sum of the.
Yeah, okay, fine.
Do you see?
I understand. Yeah.
Okay, 14 plus.
Counted some centers if they've got adult.
Definitely, definitely, because you will see that the trials are completely, in many instances, different. No problem. So, just if you look at this slide, and just to show you, industry-sponsored trials are in red, and the total number of the trials are in blue. To the left, you have the adults, to the right, you have the pediatric. So, in EpiCARE network, we had over 100 trials in the pediatric groups, which is really a huge, number of trials. We had 168, I believe, trials in the adult group, and the major part of these trials were industry-driven and industry coordinated. They were sponsored by the industry. What is, I think, really important to look here is about when we look in, again, in blue you have the total numbers, in red you have what was stated as PI for the trials, and here I think that we had some confusion between national PI or PI of the trial, and it's mea culpa, because we didn't specify this, but anyway. And you see in green, if the center was a co-author with the published data, many of these trials, over 50% were published already. And you see in purple, in whatever, if the center was involved in a safety steering committee or guidelines within this work. And what you can see, what you can see very, very well, that still there is a consistent number, and look at the green, where people from EpiCARE are really co-authors and involved in these trials, although maybe there might be some more to do, and we will discuss this with the consortium more, and how we can maybe stimulate or promote some trials that we need and we can perform in our centers. So I will not get into this. I put some in different shapes, and to say that in others, basically it's focal epilepsies, but we are beginning to see some, there is some Lennox, not many. We are beginning to see some Dravet syndrome, and in pediatric we have the top 3, Dravet, Lennox, and TSC, that are obviously here. What was interesting that people asked for exactly the same pathologies, because maybe these are the intractable, the drug-resistant ones, but anyway, there are some requests about what would you like, what are you keen to do in your center about other early onset epileptic encephalopathies, neonatal epilepsies, and there are some questions basically, or some comments about trying to do some trials based on the etiologies, genetic or metabolic etiologies, and there are some other things that you see here. And without doing the conversation with Rainer, we have some common, for what they want to do in the trial, we have some common syndromes. Top 2 difficulties. Although it was basically industry trials, I think that we always, or we often, at least for the pediatric, I would say, under-evaluate the needs for the trials. So basically the main requests were for assistance and infrastructures. The number of visits is something that is limiting for these trials. Time of the clinicians, placebo it was stated more for children, and intellectual disability. Many centers for adults discussed this point, and here here we have major part of our rare epilepsies, of our genetic epilepsies with adult patients with ID. So here there should be some things that we should think about. Expectation, again, we have exactly, I would say, the same for the other surveys. Harmonization, promote the registries, helping and assistance for clinical trials. We will not discuss about this, but yesterday during the working group we discussed about C4C, Connect for Children, which is an initiative for the implementation and to help to settle the clinical trials. We can discuss also afterward about this. Encourage less involved countries. There are really countries where they have one clinical trial with 2 or 3 patients, and definitely I will get the micro to Emilio, promote a task force or a consortium for clinical trials. So, I will just finish with the agenda. What we think is to keep on our meetings during the main congresses, and to keep to take our WebEx again. And what we think that we will need a face-to-face meeting. This is what we were discussing with Rainer, Rita, and Emilio about a face-to-face meeting with the medical therapy group. Deliverables year 2. I think that I put the main deliverable that is written, the identification of candidate treatment for testing in selected patients, and this is. Again, for the proposals, work on 1 or 2 key retrospective studies between different EpiCARE centers, and this is what we will do with Rainer and with the drug therapy. This is to have some key questions answered through retrospective study, but we were thinking definitely about proposing a pragmatic, randomize the trial without getting out of the clinical management in maybe as many centers as possible. This would be a nice beginning for our network, and we will follow up with the proposals and we will send a draft. Thank you.
So I have no slides, and what I'm going to present very, very briefly, actually to elaborate very, very briefly, is something that has been already mentioned by Renzo first and by Rima right now. And that is, once you have a center of excellence, a network of centers of excellence in Europe for rare and complex diseases, that is the idea of setting to facilitate the development of better and new treatments. We all know that in the real world, this is very much dependent on funding and collaboration with industry for pharmaceuticals, industry for devices. And it's a bit ironic that when the ERNs were set up, the EU did not identify a framework of collaboration from industry. Actually, apparently the regulations are that not only EpiCARE, like the ERNs, are not a legal entity, but also as ERN, we don't have any formal way by which we could collaborate with industry. So this is now being discussed. It might change, hopefully in the near future, but we felt that we should move forward with some alternative way. Now, you can do clinical trials in two ways. One, and it's been mentioned again, just leverage on the ERN to put together a project for European Union funding, or from funding from any funding organization, by the way. And there will be in the future, I understand, calls from the European Union where projects from ERNs will be prioritized. And definitely when a group of people who are part of the ERN get together for a project, for an application, it gives you clearly added value, and no doubt it will be considered positively. So keep that in mind very much. And that is a side. The second way you can do clinical trials is by collaborating with industry. So this goes back to what I mentioned in the introduction. And so the idea came up that we could work together towards the creation of a consortium. And that consortium, as we see it, would be a legal entity, so also allowed to make contracts with the pharmaceutical industry and receive funds from the pharmaceutical industry. We envisage of an entity that will be legal but non-profit, so no one personally or even our institution, if they are for profit, will benefit in any way financially from this. So it is just for the mission, although some revenue will come into the system. And this consortium cannot at this stage be legally labeled EpiCARE. So it has to be something outside. We may well include also members who are not at the present time part of the ERN. But it's important to keep in mind that officially this is not an ERN offshoot, although it will hopefully become a tool by which we can collaborate with industry in the implementation of research. We thought of different ways by which this collaboration could take place through the consortium. One is to help to collaborate with the pharmaceutical industry in designing more meaningful clinical trials. And I don't think I need to convince anyone that we need better quality clinical trials in the way of design, in the way of choice of endpoints, and so on. Secondly, we think because of the expertise within the RN, we could help industry in selecting the best center to perform, then allowing industry to do what they normally do, go to CROs that know very little of who is whom and where the patients are. So we are in a unique position to provide advice about the choice of center. Of course, they may take those choices, they may decide to go to additional centers, but we can certainly give an input on that. And additionally, based on the results that's been discussed today, all the activities done so far for the working packages, we know where the patients with certain rare syndromes are. So we also know where the patients are, and we could direct in this collaboration industry to those centers where recruitment could take place more efficiently. We also think that this consortium could also provide a service in validating the diagnosis for patients who are entering clinical trials. I guess many of you who are participating in clinical trials know that now actually most pharmaceutical companies, especially for complex epilepsies, require investigators to provide critical information about their patients to a consortium which is localized in the United States. The consortium will review the data and decide whether the patient is eligible or not for entry into that trial. We think that Europe, through EpiCARE with that, has the expertise to provide such a service without having to go to a separate continent. So we also discussed how this could be set up legally. I'm happy to entertain a discussion with you later because it's a complex matter. But at the end, we thought we might not actually need to put upfront any funding or get lawyers and set up a new legal entity. We may actually take advantage of a legal entity that already exists. And the number were discussed, and the feasibility came up, perhaps, and this is just now on a very preliminary basis, to use a non-profit organization which has been set up in Europe jointly by the ILE and the IBE with a specific scope of promoting epilepsy research. And I guess many of you are familiar with that, is Epilepsy Alliance Europe, is incorporated legally in Ireland as a non-profit organization. And we think perhaps we need to cross-check with our accountants and legal advisors there, but perhaps we can embed the consortium with this organization. So the idea would be that that would facilitate the implementation of clinical trials, will facilitate development of new treatments for epilepsy, will facilitate collaboration among all of us, also with industry, in conducting clinical trials, will improve the quality of clinical trials, and also, and this is not least, I think this is also important, would allow us to put together some revenue that could be used only, and this must be in the rules, to promote academic trials, those which we think are important but industry is not interested in, within the EpiCARE collaboration. So we would be eventually in a position where, as Renzo started, no funds, no money, no trials. Well, through this, we may create some funds, not definitely for huge major trials, but for small, high-quality trials within the collaboration. So this is a summary. Thank you.
So one more briefing, which is the EJP. Yes, one second. Okay. And you research and then
So you heard about European, what Philippe presented about a very huge European, I would say, on the brain initiative. There is actually a European joint program on rare diseases. That is, there is a call. The call will be on the 12th of April, and the call will be yes, this is the one. Yes, this one. This one? This one. So, it is a European joint program on rare diseases. The role is of this project is to structure the research on rare diseases in Europe. And this project will be done within 4 pillars. The first pillar, the agencies, the research agencies, will put the money to do transnational calls on rare diseases, like ERANET, the same figure. And in this pillar of where there is funding, which is pillar 1, there will be, but in 2020 and most probably 2021, dedicated calls for clinical trials. The first 2 years, there will be no calls for clinical trials. There will be 4 calls for translational, for all things that we used to see for rare diseases at ERANET. The second part, and I think that Philippe should be aware of this, and also Lieven, because this is exactly what is asked by this EGP, to have a structure that can be the verification of data and the interoperability of all the data that are existing, but more important, of all the data and of the registries that will be done from now and on in every single European project. And this applies for clinical data, this applies for all other data, and basically this applies much for all genetic and genomic data. So we can talk for 3 hours about that. I will skip it. Number 3 is, the pillar 3 is a capacity building, and this pillar is under the direction of EuroRDIS, because in this pillar, the goal is to do training, to do it in a very simple way. Alexis talked a bit about this, in the fields of rare diseases for advanced physicians, for non-advanced physicians, and for patients. So patients will have many things that can be done within this, and this is again Vilnius and EuroRDIS, Lithuania and EuroRDIS will be responsible on this. And the number 4 is a pillar that is on innovation, on methodologies in clinical studies. And this pillar will be very important because what we will have, there will be a task force working on the existing, very quickly, the existing methodologies dedicated for rare and very rare diseases. And then there will be a launch of 2 types of projects within 1 year of the project. The project, if it will be obtained, and most probably no one is registering, it will be obtained, it will be for 2009 and 2019. The projects on methodology. One type will be how to demonstrate some hypotheses that we have, and we need working on raw data, working with informatic tools on the data of trials, and the other will be on new methodologies. I will stop here, but just to tell you that we are involved in this pillar, we are involved in pillar 3, and we are secondarily involved in pillar 2. So we will update you with this. This is a call that will be launched. So we will have the results in September, October, and we will tell you about this to be ready to discuss. It will be for the 24 ERLs. We'll have the priority on the goals. So this will be also a financial, I would say, input if we are ready to do good studies altogether. That's it.
And the ERLs are well embedded, and as EpiCARE, we are embedded in the process.
How much money is it?
So this EGP, it's 50 million euro with the 50 to 70% provided by the European Community and 30, depending on the activity, by the institutions. And it includes almost all, I mean, the major groups and it is for basically more institutional project. It's not for UCL, or it's for already existing groups working on research in rare diseases. So you will find Orphanet, for instance, for 2, the pillar 2, you will find RD Connect, you will find all the groups that Philippe was talking about, that you were talking about. Here you will find for the innovation Asterix, Ideal. They were groups working on methodology, continuation of these groups in trials and rare diseases. C4C is in the innovation. So there are, I mean, I cannot detail more because it's a kind of...
It's really complicated, I have to say, and many of us who've been talking about it for a while still are struggling to understand it, but I think I'm getting there. We're in the right place. That's all I can say, really.
Wow.
Okay. So the network is directed at clinical care, but inevitably research results from that, and that will feed back into clinical care. So hence why clinical trials and research is so important.